Hello, good people, and welcome to Hillbilly Cat History Spiritual Quest, where we're in Chapter 8 of the Book of John and the Impersonal Life, which was a book that was very important to Elvis Presley and one of the very first books that he read outside of the Bible as he looked for a way to include all of the good people that he knew in his life in salvation. And before we start, we're going to listen to a song that describes Elvis's search through these texts, and it's called Word on Fire. Thank you all for gathering here at Hillbilly Cat History, where we remember together and listen for the echoes. And today we're going to return to the echoes of Gary Pepper as we look at this book that Elvis gifted to Gary called Infinite Way Letters, 1958. My theory is Elvis gave this to Gary sometime around 1965 because Elvis started his quest through these kind of books in middle of 1964. So he would have had to have some time to move through the books, to consider them on his own, to have written his annotations. And then sometime after that, he gave this volume to Gary. And we can see in this note that it's the second volume, the second book that Elvis has given to Gary about what's basically metaphysics. And that Gary liked the first one. So there's a spiritual conversation happening between Gary and Elvis. Hi, Gunn. Thank you so much for coming. Appreciate seeing you here today. This book is by a man named Joel Goldsmith. And I've never read this book, but we're able to see pages out of it that Elvis has written on. He's annotated notes to Gary or notes to himself. Depends on whether you think that this particular volume was the volume that Elvis initially read and that he wrote his own naked thoughts into, and then he trusted those to Gary. Or is this a second volume, another copy that Elvis has written specific notes to Gary and underlined specific passages? I believe there really was a very special relationship between Gary and Elvis because Gary started the relationship by gifting a Bible to Elvis, which was an acknowledgement of the faith that both men shared. And Gary faced a lot of very terrible physical limitations in his life. And so he fought a daily battle that was above and beyond what Elvis himself was fighting. Elvis was fighting spiritual and mental battles, but he could see Gary fighting both those and physical battles right in front of him. Now, Elvis grows more ill as time goes on, and he begins to, I think, feel more of what Gary struggles with every day. Not the same kind of problems, but he's got physical issues. Hi, Anna. Thank you so much for coming. Appreciate seeing you here today. But let's read through this page and what Elvis said at the bottom. We looked at it a little bit yesterday, but let's just start at the top and move our way down. And this is chapter 3 of the book. It says the practice of spiritual healing. To be successful in spiritual healing, it is necessary to come out and be separate, to adopt a clear principle from which there is no deviation. In order to be free and to free others, you yourself must know the nature of spiritual healing. So this is not talking to physical healing. This is talking to wounds of the psyche. Perhaps problems between the relationship between the person and the divine. Communication issues with the divine. What the impersonal life is referring to as the I am. The God who lives in your heart, and this is where you speak to Jesus and where you have your communion with him. And that's maybe what they're speaking to here with spiritual healing. This book says the correct premise for healing is that God constitutes individual being, individual you and me. God constitutes your being and mine, and there is nothing which can defile that pure spiritual being. There is no cause save one. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one Lord, which is a quote from Deuteronomy in the Bible, verse 6, chapter 6, verse 4. So here it's saying that we are each individuals, you and me, and that God constitutes your being and mine. So I think in the first part, it's recognizing that we're individual cells in the body of the divine. I think that's the way the impersonal life would put it. And the book of John indicates that we're all of humanity is part of a whole, that there is a unity. And the impersonal life explains the unity as the body of the divine, and that we as individual shards of the divine, that we are cells of the divine. And then it says God constitutes your being and mine. I believe this is telling us that God puts free will into each one of us, that we are made in the image of God in the sense that our bodies replicate the cellular pattern of the divine all the way down through your DNA and to your lowest subatomic particles. Everything keeps replicating that structure, which is a mirror of the divine image. Plus, we as individual shards of the divine have free will, which is something like God has. It's a reflection of the divine will. That's the constitution that he gives us. And there is nothing which can defile that pure spiritual being. I think this is telling us that our souls are incorruptible, that the corruption occurs in the expression of God's will through us here. We are expressions of God's will, the same way that a poem written on paper is the expression of the poet through the medium of paper and pen. We are that medium, that expression. In the medium here on this physical plane, the secular self, that's what causes. That's the part that can be corrupted and the part that can get in the way and interfere with the communion. But it seems to be promising here that the soul itself is incorruptible. I don't know that we have seen that in John, because it keeps saying that Jesus says, I'm here to gather everyone. He doesn't say I'm leaving the sinners behind. He says I'm gathering everyone. And so, in that sense, I think he's gathering back that which has not been defiled, which cannot be defiled. That holy part of himself that he granted to each one of us. All the divine shards will reunite. But Elvis didn't underline any of those portions. He did underline these next sentences. And they say spiritual healing cannot be based on the fact that there is something to be removed, and that in order to remove it, you must find its cause and then get rid of its effect. This seems to indicate that spiritual healing, unlike modern medical physical healing, doesn't require surgery. That you don't cut anything out. That everything must remain whole. That we're not able to heal our souls by ignoring a piece of our soul. And that following that line of logic, that's not going to heal your spiritual wounds. I think it's also saying that the opposite is what's going to heal the wounds. And that's coming to an understanding of how the wound is a blessing from the divine, because suffering is a blessing from the divine to purify us for better communication with the divine. We've seen that in the impersonal life as well, where it's telling us over and over that suffering is a purification, that it readies us for a new step, for a better understanding of the divine will. And that's the sentence that Elvis has underlined, that you can't heal yourself, your soul, by cutting something out of it or pretending that part of it is not there. Now, this text goes on and it says, nowhere in the New Testament does the Master indicate that there is a mental cause for physical disease. So this is saying Jesus never pointed to a link between your mental well-being and your physical well-being. The book says, nowhere does he say to anyone, you are ill because of this, that, or the other thing. Nowhere does he say that you are being held in bondage to this error because of that error. Nowhere does he say that there is a cause for disease. Rather, he demonstrated irrefutably his firm conviction that disease is not a power. And he said, stretch forth thine hand. Woman, thou art loosed from thine infirmity. Lazarus, come forth. Which is a quote from John that we've not got to yet, out of chapter 11. Lazarus, come forth, which is raising someone from the dead. We've already seen him raise people from the dead. But I think what the text is telling us here, and Elvis hasn't underlined this part, but it's saying disease is not a punishment. Physical infirmity is not a punishment for spiritual failure. That disease is part of the secular life that we lead, and it's connected to the secular things in that life. It's not spiritual. It's not an outgrowth of spiritual decay. I think it's what Elvis was telling us in other notes that he wrote about beauty, where he's stating that he sees beauty in the spiritual, but that the physical manifestation of beauty, the face, or the body, or the hair, or whatever it is that's beautiful about a person, physically, it's not linked to the beauty of their spirit. That the beauty of your spirit can enhance your physical beauty, but your beauty, your actual physical form, is not linked to your spirit, in the sense that it neither reflects nor your beauty or your spiritual issues or your spiritual failures. So I think that's what it's telling us here, is that you can't fix something in your spirit and believe that that's going to fix a physical ailment that you have, because they're not linked. I think the impersonal life is telling us that those physical ailments that you are suffering, they're like all other suffering on this plane of existence. They're here to help purify your soul. That they're not linked to an issue with your soul, but there are issues with hearing the I am in your heart that are because the secular parts get in the way, and that there are challenges. And Elvis has already noted to us there are no problems, but there are challenges that are given to us, and that these are some type of purification. And um, that's not the same as these spiritual wounds that are being talked about in this chapter. And we don't get any more of the chapter, so that's all we get to hear from the author. But Elvis has written at the bottom, power over one's mental state has the effect of healing. So he doesn't indicate whether he's speaking of spiritual healing or physical healing. And we know that Elvis did believe in the ability of physical healing through spiritual alignment. That's also an idea that's brought forth in the impersonal life. And it reflects it as an ability to control your own cells through alignment. And then if you're truly aligned, you'll be able to control the cells of others. And in the book of John, there's a lot of miracles of healing. And it would seem that the impersonal life is reflecting how those miracles may be working. The problem with that is that once you explain away a miracle in any way, then it's no longer a miracle. So there is some conflict there between the way that Benner wants to describe what was happening when Jesus healed someone, which is a true miracle, and the fact that Benner has an explanation for it, which is like trying to explain a magic trick. Once you explain it, there is no magic there, but we know that with a miracle, there is a miracle. So it can't be explained away. That's what the Pharisees were trying to do as well. So there is tension. This is one of the reasons that some of the tension that creates a non-acceptance in Christian religions or organized religion for Benner's texts, who would probably also have issues with what we're looking at here, this other book. But Elvis, I think, might be arguing with this text. It's saying power over one's mental state does have the effect of healing. So the healing of spiritual wounds can affect the physical form. I think that Elvis is trying to link or square this or make sense of this with the impersonal life. And I think part of that making sense is the tension I've talked about. Is both are trying to maybe come in at explaining how a miracle works. And you just can't do that. And Gunn asks, is this a holy Bible? No, this is also a metaphysical text. Infinite Way Letters by Joel Goldsmith, written from a very Christian perspective. He's looking to spread the word of Christ. But these are his personal thoughts about it, just as Benner's book is Benner's personal thoughts about Christianity and how the Holy Bible should be interpreted. So they're reflections on the Bible, but they're not Bibles themselves. And they're not Bibles because they're not accepted by large organized groups as scripture that they're going to use for their religious purposes. It might even be more helpful to think of these kind of books as these are conversations between um, people of faith, but not the same religion. Like if someone from the Baptist persuasion were to talk to a Catholic, where would you find your common ground? And how would you find truth in that common ground? And that's what these metaphysical texts are trying to show, that there is common ground among all of these different faiths. And that common ground is really shining a light towards the truth that's not necessarily easily seen in any of their holy books. And now let us return to the book of John, but we're doing it through comic book form, and we're reviewing chapter 7 so that we can get into chapter 8. And this also mixes in some things that happened in the Gospels that John didn't reflect in his book. And in this panel it says, "They that receive tribute money say to Peter, 'Does not your master pay tribute?' And Peter says yes." Now Peter's master is Jesus. And they that receive tribute money, I'm not really sure what the tribute is they're referring to. It's probably something to do with the church, the temples, connected to the Pharisees, I'm guessing. Something about tax collecting, maybe. And Jesus tells Peter, lest we should offend them, pay the tribute. Go to the sea. So Jesus agrees to pay this tribute as Peter had said they would. And Peter goes to the sea and he casts a hook and he takes up the first fish. Now, Peter was a fisherman, so he's probably pretty good at this. And what's really interesting about this picture is that Peter does not have a rod or a reel, and that you and I would always think of a fisherman as a man with a rod and a reel. They didn't have any rods or reels back then. This was long before that. And Gunn says that Elvis's words make sense, that the mental state has an effect on the physical state. And I think that they don't just make sense to us now, they are medical science approves of that strategy. Medical science believes that a good attitude leads to better recovery. And when you're in a hospital, at least the last time I was, they have you describe a lot of stuff through smiley and frowny faces. Like the more pain you have, the bigger frown the face has, and the better you feel, the bigger the smile is on the face. So there's visual recognition of the truth that your mind does affect your physical state. Now, is your mind your spirit? Does your spiritual state affect your physical state? I think it's possible it could, but I think the other lesson that I'm not sure whether Elvis agrees with or not is the physical state, even though it may be affected by your spiritual state, is not a punishment. It's not something sent by God to punish you for your spiritual state. Hi, Pat. Thank you so much for coming. Appreciate seeing you here. But here we can see Peter, and he's fishing. All he's got is a line and a hook. And he's got it wound up in his hand, and he kind of tosses it out there. And it makes you realize that people fished. They were fishing in a far different way, although similar as well, to the way that we would think of it today, that we're blessed to have rods and reels. If you've ever been fishing, a rod and a reel is a blessing, because trying to throw your hook out like this, it's difficult. He probably didn't have sinkers of any kind. I don't know that he even had a bobber. So I don't even know how he knew when a fish was biting on the hook. Maybe he could feel it in his hand. And I don't know what kind of string he has. We got this invisible, it's like a nylon or plasticky string now. But back then it would have been some kind of fiber, natural fiber, probably kind of thick. Those fish probably saw it. It was probably difficult to fish in this manner. And Peter would normally fish with a net. I mean, they would normally go out in a boat with the net. You had to get out far enough where the fish were. And then you kind of grabbed them in the net. But this might have even given a young Elvis or other lads of the day an idea about how they might be able to fish without a rod and reel, because fishing was popular among young boys back then. Now, Elvis, probably not so much. He never did like seafood or fish in particular. This panel says, and in the fish's mouth, you will find a piece of money. That take and give to them for us. So Peter goes out and catches this fish like Jesus has told him. And just like Jesus said, there's a piece of money in the mouth of the fish. Now, Elvis did not like to eat fish. I'm assuming that goes back to his childhood. So when he saw this panel, if he saw it, this comic book was printed in 1942. Elvis would have been about 7 years old. I think there's a good chance he might have seen this comic, because it's the kind that a lot of different adults would have bought and had around for a while. It also would have had a really long shelf life at the retailer. And it was the kind of comic that parents and other adult groups, they wouldn't have thrown it away like they would have other comics that they would have seen as frivolous. This one had a message that they wanted to get to the kids. And so when Elvis saw this panel, he may have not liked it because he didn't like the fish, and that's what he'd be thinking, I don't want to eat this fish. And that part would have turned him away from the panel. But then the piece of money that's found in the fish's mouth. Now, Elvis, he never loved money in any way, but he recognized that money could purchase him, like a trip to the movies or whatever it is that his heart's desire as a boy was, and that his mother and father struggled for money. And so here's a way, maybe he could go out and fish, and these fish would have money in their mouth. I wonder how many boys might have gone out and tried to catch a fish to see if it had a piece of money in its mouth. But that's how they pay the tribute, whatever that was that they had to pay in order not to attract negative attention within the society. And in this panel, I believe we're looking at Jesus with all of the disciples. Yeah, there are 12 men in this picture. These are the 12 disciples. And there is a boy that is washing Jesus' feet. And I believe all of the disciples have just joined Jesus. They were away and now they've all regrouped. Now we might notice what they're wearing. They've all got some kind of flowing garment that I would think of as like an ankle-length tunic. it looks to be like one piece that they drape over their heads that's got sleeves and a neck, a hole for your head. And then it's like a long dress. Um, and then it's belted in the middle. They wrap something around to belt it. They've also wearing some kind of wrap. They've got a lot of them have a piece wrapped around them. Looks maybe like it's some kind of blanket wrapped around them. Reminds me a lot of the togas that the wealthy Romans of this period would have been wearing. So I don't know if they've adopted this from the Romans or if this was what the Jews had, their culture had naturally grown to wear, or if this is the thoughts of a 20th century illustrator. But they're far different clothes than what Elvis would wear. And I'm noting them because we know that Elvis had an intense interest in fashion. And I don't know when his interest in fashion started. And it wasn't fashion to be fashionable, it was expression through clothing. He personally expressed himself through his clothing. And we've seen him wear religious symbols that express his faith in his belief in faiths of different kinds, that faith is important. But I wonder if any of his outfits reflected his faith in some way that we've never recognized before. And how much time he would have spent as a kid looking at the different things that they wore. But Jesus is asking these people, the disciples, what were you arguing about among yourselves on the way here? And I don't think they were disputing based on what the story is so much as they were telling tall tales or bragging about themselves, and they were like one-upping each other in brags about the future, because they say they are ashamed to say that they had disputed about who should be the greatest. So one of them says, I'm going to be the greatest apostle it's ever known. And the other one says, no, I'm going to do things that are even bigger. And another one says, I'm going to bring more sheep to the flock. And this would be a very common form of communication between a group of boisterous men. Like if you've got a group of guys that are on the same team for a sports thing, like they're on a basketball team or a football team or a hockey team, in the locker room, they probably have a lot of boasting and bragging in this way. It's a form of they bolster each other's courage in that moment about these great things that they're going to do. They get out there and they score those touchdowns or make those goals. And I think maybe that's some of what was going on here. Although they may in truth have been arguing with each other about who was going to be better. And maybe there were some bitter feelings that were coming out or being expressed that have now sown seeds of yet more bitterness among the 12 men of this group. I think it's a common pattern for a group of men to be involved in, and that it can get out of control. That's kind of what you got a coach there for on those teams, and they come in and try to control that competitive spirit and keep it aimed at the opposing team. Although in this case, there's not really an opposing team. It's more about banding together in the face of adversities that they're all going to face together. And in this panel, Jesus says that if any man desire to be first, the same shall be last of all and the servant of all. And he's warning them against their own arrogance, that their arrogance will interfere with the broadcast of the I am in their heart. We can think of the I am as your personal radio station, constantly receiving a signal from God. It's a two-way broadcast. You can call back. But even if you're not listening, the broadcast continues. But your arrogance can make it sound like it stopped. It can distort it. You can get in the way. And even though we've talked about a compass of alignment, even though you're still pointed northish, you're moving too far east or west, because that arrogance is distorting where you think the radio signal's coming from. And you still believe that you're doing the right thing, but arrogance has gotten in the way, and now you're going to be the last of all. Because you're not headed in the right direction. Mostly in the right direction, but you're not headed fully in the right direction. And in this panel, it says, except ye be converted and become as little children, ye shall not enter into the kingdom of heaven. So the boy that was washing Jesus' feet, Jesus points to him as an example and says that you men need to look to the example of the small child. And I believe that he's trying to tell them that the boy doesn't have any arrogance. The boy was washing my feet. And then he says, whosoever therefore shall humble himself as this little child, the same is greatest in the kingdom of heaven. The child has humbled himself through action. The men have increased their arrogance through spoken word. They've given their arrogance power by speaking it aloud, and in that way manifesting the word. We've been looking at a lot of stuff about creation and manifestation. Well, you create arrogance and these distortions in the same way you do all creation. So we tend to think of creations as good, but they can be not good too. They're distorting the broadcast of the I am. They've spoken power into these ideas of arrogance. That's what the impersonal life would be telling us. And Jesus is saying that this boy, he's not speaking. He's not putting the power of, he's not manifesting his thoughts in this manner. He's manifesting through action, through humbling himself. And he's shown his faith in that manner. And he's hearing the I am clearly. And in this panel, we've moved on to another story where the Jews look for Jesus at the feast and they say, where is he? And Gunn says that it's not easy for a grown-up to be as innocent like a child, though. It isn't it too much to ask for? Well, that's a good point. Why are these men arrogant? Why do they wish to be arrogant? What other adult emotions and secular thoughts can get in the way of your communion with the I am? Well, if we look at a child who is, as we think of as innocent, they don't have a lot of these other thoughts because they haven't been introduced to them yet. And they don't have the responsibility that the adults have, which brings some of these thoughts that create the worries about what's going to happen to your kids, or do you have enough money to feed everybody today? You know, Elvis, as he read this comic book, if he did when he was 7 or 8, he might have keyed in on that piece of money, like I stated, and knew that his parents struggled for it, but he wouldn't have felt the responsibility that they did. And that would certainly have interfered with their hearing of the I am. And can you turn off your thoughts of worry, or in this case, arrogance? Seems easy that you might be able to turn off thoughts of arrogance, but I think we could expand this to lessons of anything that your secular brain is worried about or caught on. I kind of think of it as spinning. Your brain spins over and over, and you can't let go of certain thoughts. These are probably worries about your secular life. Probably not worries about spiritual life. Might, but most of us were pretty focused on the secular. And Gunn's pointing out that those concerns come from being an adult, from understanding things the child can't understand. And that it seems impossible for us to turn those pieces off and to have true communion with the I am. But I think what the impersonal life would be telling us is, be still and know I am God. So part of the be still, which is also cease struggling, is that in meditation or some other format, you're going to be able to separate yourself from what we would think of as the non-innocence and return to the innocence of the child. And in those moments of that innocence, that's when the broadcast will come through most clearly. So it may be too much to ask. It may be that we can't really enter that state and that we're fooling ourselves about it even when we're in meditation. That there's always going to be something that's distorting the message of the I am simply because we are secular beings. So I don't think the message is that if you do not reach this state, you will not commune with God. I think it's like the compass. It's what you need to aim for. If you can't go straight north, go northeast. Keep going northeast. Don't turn south. Keep going northeast. But you may not be able to push it all the way to the north. Because God understands there's all these difficulties in the way. He gave them to us. He understands them. And so I think what it's being said is, aim in this direction. You may never reach it. It will always be a struggle. But just keep looking to God and telling him, it's a struggle, I can't do it. And that the rest is going to take care of itself from there. That he's going to send you the messages that you need. And in this panel, it says, the Jews look for Jesus at the feast. Where is he? So this appears in this panel like it's all the Jewish people, the Pharisees, the normal people, the representatives of the government. Everybody's in the panel, right? And they're all at this feast. I don't know what feast this is. I don't know if we've gone a whole year, we've made it to Passover again. But there's a feast. Some kind of religious celebration. In this panel, some say Jesus is a good man. And others say, no, Jesus deceives the people. So there's controversy among the Jews about whether Jesus is good or bad. The panel doesn't define who's saying what, but it looks like the people that are arguing in the panel are fairly well dressed. So it appears to be Pharisees. And I'm not sure if they're arguing with just a normal merchant um, or they're arguing with another of their own clan, of their own social order. But we can see many people talking all the way into the background. So it doesn't really tell us, is this a 50-50 split? Is it more than that? Do more people believe Jesus is a good man, or do more believe he's deceiving the people? And Gunn says that it could be difficult for a child to understand that grown-ups should be like a child, be accepted by Jesus. Yeah, that's a good point too. That when Elvis read that and he saw that grown-ups should be more like kids, I wonder if any other kids saw that and told their parents that they should be more like them. It's right here in the comic book. But that is a good point. In this panel, it says, in the midst of the feast, Jesus goes into the temple and he teaches. So Jesus does appear and he states what he believes and he lets people hear it. And I'm sure the ones that believed in him, they just believed in him that much more. And the ones that didn't believe, I have no idea whether his words changed their hearts or not. We would think it changed a few. Now, these are obviously Pharisees in this picture. And they're talking to some non-Pharisees, and they say, how can this man teach, since he never learned? So I think they're pointing out that Jesus is an uneducated man. He didn't have any formal teaching. And of course, back then, formal school would have been something you would have had to pay for, if it was even available to you. If your father had enough money, you might have a private tutor. And that, of course, would be just as acceptable, if not more, as having gone to any kind of institution they would have had back then. But Jesus didn't have any of that. He was a very poor child. And Gunn says that children usually look up to grown-ups. Yeah, especially in the 40s they did. So it could have been an even more confusing message in the 40s, that children should act more like, or adults should act more like children. However, I do think that there is somewhat of a trope through uh, American mythology of the 1930s, 40s, 50s, and 60s that it's greatly challenged during the 70s. It's pushed away in the 80s, and it's basically all flipped on its head from the 90s forward. But um, back in the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, I think there were a lot of television shows and novels and comic books that would have indicated that the innocence of a child was the key to success of various outcomes of the plots from those things, right? Like that was a common lesson, that adults would need to see things through the lenses of a child's eyes and use that innocence. Um, and I think it comes out a lot in things like Leave It to Beaver, which is basically a television show that is all about a child's viewpoint of the world and the innocence of a child. Or it's later reflected in things like The Brady Bunch. So I'm not sure it would have been a completely foreign idea, but if you just looked on it at its own, And then you think about Elvis and some of these young boys, and they're going down to the swimming hole that Gladys has told them not to. And then they're thinking, well, we just read this comic that said these parents should be more like the kids, and we're all down here swimming. You could use that to justify some bad behavior, or it could get you confused about who's in authority. And in this panel, Jesus says, my doctrine is not mine, but his that sent me. Ye both know me, and ye know whence I am. I am from him, and he hath sent me. So they've questioned Jesus's education, which is something that happened to Elvis a lot. People were like always questioning Elvis's education. And Vernon, think how much Vernon suffered in the press to this day, where people still say that he was ignorant because he only made it so far in his formal education, as if the man was unable to learn anything from that point forward. Like he just stopped learning after he left. I think he made it to the 6th grade. I'm not sure. But whatever grade he made it through. But we know Elvis graduated high school, which was the standard of the time and the most that anyone in his family had ever achieved in terms of education. But Jesus in this panel tells these men who have questioned his education, my doctorate, my PhD came from the University of God, straight from the dean, God himself, who is my father. And this is what he said. I'm repeating word for word the way that he's said these things. And therefore, they are real, whereas what you are saying is reflections that are distorted. And that's where we're going to have to leave this for today, because we've reached the end of another hour. And Gunn points out that the children may have then begun worrying about their parents not being accepted by Jesus. That's an interesting point too, Gunn. I don't remember ever wondering if my parents were saved. They were very religious when I was a child. So I don't know whether any children would have looked at this and then began to wonder if their parents were saved. Or began to wonder if, even though their parents said they were saved, if they truly were. You know, how much religious thought would one of these comics, or even the words of the Bible itself, have awakened in a child around 7 to 10 years old, who was kind of the target for the comic. There might have been a hope kids 11 through 14 read it as well, but I think they were targeted towards 6 to 10. Thank you, Anna, for being here today. Appreciate you so much coming to the show. I'm going to leave you guys with a song. This one's going to be Quiet Light. And until I see you all again, you all keep on taking care of business. 3 p.m. today, got another show, more magazine articles.
Beauty walks soft as a whisper, yet thunders like storms overhead. Kind and gentle in its passing, still a thing of might and dread. And the word became a lantern, placed in trembling human hands, saying, child, behold my glory, not in faces, but in hearts that understand. For the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness cannot overcome. Every soul receives a lantern, every wanderer is called home. He wrote truth in quiet margins for the ones who read between. Faith will conquer, said the giver. I am the light you've always seen. Beauty's not the mask we're wearing, not the mirrors feeding grace. Beauty burns within the heart space, kindness casting God's own shadow on the contours of a face. And the I am speaks in stillness, in the breath between each thought. The soul remembers union with the love it never lost. For the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness cannot overcome. Every soul receives a lantern, every wanderer is called home. He wrote truth in quiet margins for the ones who read between. Faith will conquer, said the giver. I am the light you've always seen. Distance only closes in the moment, when the veil of flesh is torn. Yet the word says I am with you from the instant you are born. Dreams stay cold, room silent, body, mind and spirit still as one. In that hush the lantern brightens, and the night becomes undone. Be as gentle as the lamb is when you're dealing out your love. Be as fearless as the lion when you guard what's holy from above. Let your honor strike like lightning, swift and righteous in its speed. For the light that lives within you is the strength behind the creed. For the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness cannot overcome. Every soul receives a lantern, every seeker finds the one. He wrote truth in quiet margins as a gift for those in need. Faith will conquer, said the giver. Walk in light and you are free. And the I am whispers softly as the lantern warms your hand. I am beauty, I am kindness,